So today we'll be dealing with cell signaling, which belongs to unit 7 of your CC4 paper. And I've divided the signaling class into two sections. The first section will deal on the signaling category, molecules and receptors. And the second part is more specific. As per your syllabus, we'll be doing only two basic pathways, the JAK-STAT pathway and the RTK pathway. I'm not will be coming into the details later on. So these are the reference books. So most of my pictures are from Cooper, Bruce Alberts. That is the basic book that I've followed totally. And in addition, I've gone through Leninger's Biochemistry, Physiology Guyton, Karp, Purves. So you can have a checklist of the reference, and you can go through the books for yourself when you want to. So let's start with the basic principle of cell signaling. If I look into this picture at the left, where a schematic summary of how a signaling pathway occurs is shown. Very schematically it has been shown that cell signaling can result either from direct interaction of the cell with its neighbor or from the action of secreted signaling molecules. So a signaling molecule can be secreted from the neighbor or can travel from a distant pathway and binds to a receptor on the cell's surface. On and off, it might so happen that the stimuli may directly enter the cell. So that option is also there. Once the stimuli binds to the receptor, now let's look. A host of pathways are switched on one after the another. The receptor binds with the stimulus and it activates certain molecules known as transducers. That is, they carry the signal on. Then the amplifiers who magnify the signal, the messengers. Once the signal is magnified, the messenger carries the message further downstream to the sensors. Sensors may be the DNA itself. And the effector is that once a DNA senses that a particular gene needs to be activated, gene transcription of that particular effector signaling gene occurs. So there are effectors and then there is cellular response. So the response might be multifarious as you can see here. Now, if you look into this picture, the picture has green arrows and the picture has red arrows. The green arrow signals or signifies that it's a dynamic process and the green arrows are the on mechanisms during which information flows the down pathway. So it moves from the receptors down to ultimately the sensors, that is the DNA. And it might be that some signals are received and the sensors might be some cytoplasmic molecules also. And if you look into the off pathway, based on the feedback, once a signaling process has moved to the sensors and the effectors and a cellular response has thus been achieved, a time comes when we need to slow down the signaling process or to curtail the signaling process. So there is a feedback mechanism. By this feedback, it might happen that the pathway may be gradually switched off also. In this picture on the inset right side, if you can see, I have showed you the basic categories. This is a very schematic or a summary representation of the basic categories of signaling. The signaling can be broadly divided into contact dependent, paracrine, synaptic, endocrine. Now, we'll be coming into this picture in details. So let me get into the next slide where in details we'll be discussing what are these various categories of signals. So now coming into the categories of signaling. If I look into the categories of signaling, let's first start with this one, this picture and this picture, autocrine. Autocrine is a local signaling mechanism where the cell releases a stimulus and the cells which release the stimulus now upregulate receptors to receive those stimulus back. So these are the cells. They themselves are releasing the stimulus. They are also upregulating the receptors for the stimulus so that the receptors can bind with the stimulus and activate these cells. A very classical example of autocrine action is seen in case of blood platelets, where the blood platelets release eicosanoids. It's a form of chemical that is released. We'll be reading about these chemicals later on. So these blood platelets release eicosanoids and they produce receptors for these eicosanoids, and they receive those receptors and thus proliferate further. Another beautiful example of autocrine action is the example of lymphocytes. Blood cells, there are a category of blood cells which you have read about them in class 11 and 12. They are broadly known as agranulocytes. Lymphocytes can also release a lot of autocrine signaling stimuli such as interleukin molecules or cytokines, and they can also upregulate receptors for these cytokines, receive the stimulus themselves, and then again further divide. So this is our autocrine action, the first category of signaling. So the signaling might be autocrine. Next, let me move on to the category known as paracrine. In case of paracrine, it is actually a local signaling process whereby one cell releases a stimulus that diffuses away to act locally on cells or in the immediate neighborhood. So look at this cell. This cell is releasing a stimulus that locally diffuses and is received by a cell in the immediate neighborhood. Look at this picture. You can see this picture. This cell is releasing the stimulus and the neighboring cells have upregulated receptors for these stimulus, and the receptors are now binding with the stimulus and these cells are becoming upregulated. Mind it, for a paracrine signaling, the cell which secretes the stimulus is not activated. If it was activated, then it would be autocrine. So the cell which is signaling, or which is releasing the stimulus, is itself not activated. Keep this in mind. Only the cells adjacent to it, only the cells nearby to it are activated because the stimulus are taken up by receptors, and these receptors result in the activation of these neighboring cells. Now, there are a host of examples of paracrine stimuli. One which you have read in class 11 and 12 is the action of the neurotransmitters. So you can say this is a synapse. I've shown this picture. This is a synapse, and you have studied earlier that in the synapse, the presynaptic, the presynaptic neuron liberates certain neurotransmitters, a perfect example of which is acetylcholine. These neurotransmitters are then taken up by the receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane, and the postsynaptic membrane is thus activated. So you can assume that these presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane are very closely placed adjacent to each other in our nervous system. So when a presynaptic membrane releases certain stimuli, the postsynaptic membrane receives those stimuli and the postsynaptic membrane is thus activated. So this is a beautiful example of paracrine signaling. I'd like to give you one more example. In wounds, when we have wounds in our body, H2O2, hydrogen peroxide, is liberated. This hydrogen peroxide diffuses to activate the local leukocytes that are circulating nearby. These local leukocytes, I mean to say the lymphocytes. These local lymphocytes, on receiving this diffusible H2O2, then gradually tends to migrate towards the wound region. So this is another example of a paracrine signaling. Now coming to another important category of signaling is the endocrine. We have all studied the endocrine system, and you are all aware that during endocrine signaling, the stimulus is usually a hormone that is released from one cell, that is released from one cell to enter the bloodstream, to enter the bloodstream, to be carried around the body, to act on cells expressing the appropriate receptors. So the endocrine system is very specific, secretes hormones. Hormones are circulated by the bloodstream, and on reaching their target cells, they recognize the target cells by the presence of receptors, or at times it so happens that hormones can directly diffuse into the cell. There are two mechanisms. We'll talk about this later on. So whatever. So the hormones, once released into the circulation, they reach their target cell, which is placed quite distant in the body, and these target cells then accept this stimulus or the hormone molecules via their receptors and are thus activated. So this is the other picture for it. So this was the original cell, the stimulus or the hormone into the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream the hormone diffuses out and is then taken up by our target cell with the upregulation of its receptors. So these are so we have as an example for the endocrine system, we can have any hormonal pathway as an example. So since we have studied hormones when in your 11 and 12, so I'm not going into details the hormonal pathway. So there is a fourth kind of signaling, which is known as fourth category of signaling, rather, the juxtacrine signaling. Now let me show you the picture of the juxtacrine signaling from here. See, this is the contact dependent signaling. Let's magnify this image, and you can see this particular signaling. See, the ligand is bound to the membrane. So the stimulus is bound to the membrane. The stimulus is not released, and the bound stimulus now activates the bound receptor on the target cell. That means the stimuli is not released into the medium. The stimuli remains attached to the cell membrane, and the cell moves towards the membrane carrying the receptor, and the ligand binds with the receptor, and the target cell is activated. And at least the second SEM had read such an example. The activation of the FAST receptor, you have read apoptosis. I've taught you apoptosis in my earlier classes. The activation of the FAST receptor by the FAST ligand during the extrinsic pathway is a juxtacrine signaling or a contact dependent signaling. So these are basically the four categories of signaling. Now we'll gradually move on to the stimuli of signaling. So we have dealt with the four categories of signaling. Now let me give you a very brief in-view about the differences in the basic categories. As you can see in this particular table, the nervous system has been given a separate importance, because in case of nervous system, there are a lot of ways how the stimulus moves. As we saw the example of paracrine, that in case of paracrine signaling also we saw the example of nervous system, where the neurotransmitters are liberated into the synapse by the presynaptic neuron and are taken up by the postsynaptic neuron. So this mode of transmission is chemical, but you all know that electrical impulse also travels through nervous system. Since second semester has not yet read plasma membrane, but I'd like to mention one point. In plasma membrane, there are certain junctions known as gap junctions. So when electrical stimuli moves through neurons, the gap junctions are used to transfer these stimuli. So I'm not getting, so nervous system deserves special mention and thus have been kept as a separate column in this comparative table. But if you look, so let's ignore the nervous system right now. And if you look into the comparison between the autocrine, paracrine, and the endocrine, the one thing I'd like all of you to notice is that the distance is short, the distance is long. Here, the medium is the extracellular fluid. Here, the medium is the circulatory system. The speed is much higher in case of autocrine or paracrine stimulation. This is much slower because this is much slower because it's moving through the circulatory system and takes time. And the response, this is another important thing, the response. So immediately after receiving the stimuli, the response is very fast. Here you can see the response is much longer. The response will take time. Now coming to the signaling molecules. So for second semester, in your syllabus, you have category, you have signaling molecules, and you have receptors. These are some of the standard signaling molecules that are used by a living system to carry on. I said the word living system because it's not only mammals. Host variety of all living systems use one or another type of signaling molecules to communicate between cells. Now, if you look into the stimuli, see, the 4 categories have been shown here. So there can be growth factors, is one kind of stimuli, growth factors and cytokines. There can be eicosanoids, nitric oxides, will be coming into this one by one. There can be hormones and neurotransmitters. So the stimuli might be growth factors and cytokines. A lot of growth factors also include hormones, mind it. There can be stimuli, eicosanoids, nitric oxides and ATP, that is a kind of stimuli. And another important stimuli are the hormones itself and neurotransmitters. These stimuli can then move in 4 categories of signaling. It can move through blood vessels to give rise to the endocrine category of signaling. It can directly activate a neighboring cell, giving rise to the paracrine category of signaling. It can be received by the cell releasing the stimuli, resulting in autocrine category of signaling, or ligands, membrane anchored stimuli. Ligands can be expressed by a cell, which can now activate a receptor present on another cell, giving rise to contact dependent or juxtacrine mode of or category of signaling. So depending on the stimuli, these are the 4 standard basic category of signaling that can be observed within living systems. Now I'll be moving on to the stimuli one after another. Coming to hydrophobic signaling molecules. You can well understand hydrophobic. That means these molecules are not water loving. They prefer lipid. So hydrophobic signaling molecules can bind to receptors on the cell, or they can move it through the plasma membrane into the cytoplasm directly. Since hydrophobic, we know that the plasma membrane is made up of lipid bilayer, and these are lipid-loving molecules. They can move through the plasma membrane, diffuse through the plasma membrane into the cytoplasm itself. Let me show you a picture of such hydrophobic signaling. So, as you can see this hormone, lipophilic hormone or a hydrophobic molecule. since it is a lipophilic molecule or a hydrophobic, lipophilic means lipid loving, hydrophobic means water hating. So you can see it diffuses directly through the plasma membrane into the cytoplasm, where there are receptors for it in the cytoplasm. So they bind with the cytoplasmic receptor, and the receptor is activated, or you can see the fate. It can bind in the cytoplasm with the cytoplasmic receptor, or it can move directly into the nucleoplasm to bind with the nuclear receptor. Either or, it can bind in the cytoplasm, or it can move directly into the nucleoplasm to bind with the receptor. And once binding with the receptor, hormone receptor complex is formed, and the hormone receptor complex can now bind to specific regions of the DNA, which are known as hormone response element, thereby activating certain genes. So this is one way in which the hydrophobic molecules act. The best example are the thyroid hormone, vitamin D3, and the retinoic acid. So this was the mechanism of action of hydrophobic hormones or lipophilic molecules. Coming to the next category was the nitric oxide and carbon monoxide. Now, nitric oxide is a simple gas, and remember, it's a major paracrine signaling molecule. Again, repeating, it's a paracrine signaling molecule in the nervous, immune, and circulatory system. So, this is nitric oxide, and as you can see, this is an activated nerve terminal, the nitric activated nerve terminal. So this is an example of acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is liberated. From acetylcholine in the endothelial cells, with the help of acetylcholine, enzyme is activated known as nitric oxide synthetase, and nitric oxide synthetase can then synthesize nitric oxide from the amino acid arginine. Okay, so this cell is now capable of synthesizing nitric oxide. Once this nitric oxide is synthesized in the cell now rapidly releases nitric oxide into the extracellular space. So the nitric oxide is now moving out by diffusion. The nitric oxide is now moving out by diffusion, and then it enters a target cell where it can bind to a specific receptor. In this case, the receptor is guanyl cyclase. That's an enzyme again. And thereafter, it results in the relaxation of smooth muscle. So, nitric oxide is transiently generated. Its action is very rapid. The way it is generated, similarly, it is easily also destroyed, and it is locally released, locally activates the neighboring cells, and brings about the local effector response of the target cell. So this is nitric oxide. And another important gas, I didn't get any picture regarding carbon monoxide. Another important gas which also functions very similar in the manner of nitric oxide is carbon monoxide. It also acts as an important signaling molecule in the nervous system. It is closely related to nitric oxides, and it has been seen that at times it acts as a neurotransmitter and is also a mediator of blood vessel dilation. Just like nitric oxide, carbon monoxide can be synthesized in the brain by the action of neurotransmitters. See, here if you remember, if you see this picture, while I was explaining how nitric oxides are generated, a nitric oxide is generated when a signal comes from a neurotransmitter. A very famous neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. You can see the picture of acetylcholine. It's a very famous neurotransmitter. So when an activated nerve signal releases acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is taken up by a target cell, then only the signal for generation of nitric oxide is induced. Similarly, carbon monoxide generation can also be induced by neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine. Just like nitric oxide can be bound to guanyl cyclase, resulting in further signaling amplification. Similarly, carbon monoxide can also stimulate guanyl cyclase, thus targeting a cell to respond to carbon monoxide molecules. So these were the second category of signaling molecules.